Hello and welcome to Signs and Wonders. I'm making this recording late in 2020 and a lot of astrologers are putting up YouTube videos about the great conjunction that's about to happen between Jupiter and Saturn. And this is indeed a sign and a wonder. These great conjunctions, as they're called, only happen every 20 years. And they happen in a series of cycles and they change elements every couple of hundred years. So for the last 200 years, all those conjunctions that happened every 20 years were happening in earth signs. And the people on this planet, especially in the Western culture, have been very preoccupied with earthy, practical matters. It's around 200 years ago that the Industrial Revolution and the benefits to us of all that technology and so forth started to really take off. Think of the railway trains and manufacturing to a high level so that we were producing more goods. And that's very earthy. So Saturn and Jupiter conjuncting through the earth signs was part of the stability of our Western culture and the way that we could build factories, build cities, build airports, build railway stations, and keep a structure for ourselves that made our lives feel comfortable in an earthy kind of way. So when Saturn and Jupiter conjunct in an air sign and start moving into 200 years of air sign conjunctions, we can see that this is a very, very big deal because earth and air are very different elements. Earth-based signs of the zodiac are all about practicalities. We have Taurus, we have Virgo, we have Capricorn. And all those three signs are preoccupied with how to make things good at a material level in one way or another. So now we're moving into the air sign. And the first conjunction in the air sign will be in Aquarius. So there are two other air signs. There's Libra and Gemini. So they're to come. Actually, there was a quick interruption in the Earth cycle in 1980, 81, 82. Across that period, Jupiter and Saturn were going through the sign of Libra, which is one of the air signs, but then it reverted back to its proper pattern of Earth signs. It's a bit of complicated astrological stuff, really, and there's plenty of very good writing about it and blogs and so forth on the net from very competent astrologers. I particularly recommend an article by Jessica Davidson, who's jessicadavidson.co.uk, and she's written a really good article if you want to get into the complexities, and she also tells you the old dates when it happened previously and so forth, so you can look at those patterns if that calls to you. However, what's most important to consider, even if you have no astrology geekiness in your head at all, is that there is a big change going on. And when you look at the sky coming up very, very shortly before the winter solstice, and you see Jupiter and Saturn, and you may not even see them as two separate bodies, you may see them as one very bright light, a kind of Star of Bethlehem light. This is a sign and a wonder for a big change at a cultural level. And that big change for the culture will affect you personally according to your personal natal birth chart, which you can find out. You can find out where Aquarius sits in your birth chart. You might not be born with the sun or the moon in Aquarius or Aquarius rising, but Aquarius will be in the birth chart somewhere, and by looking at it, you can find out what area of your life will be affected by that conjunction. So again, I recommend you go online and make sure, I think every spiritual seeker should have their birth chart and know what's going on. As I say, even if you don't want to get geeky about astrology. So let's have a think about what Aquarius might be about for those two big planets. And they're slow moving, 12 years for Jupiter through the sign, and then 3 years approximately for Saturn. And they're both kind of competitive in a way, those two characters. Jupiter, we could say Jupiter is cosmic yes, and Saturn is cosmic no. And in my system that I work with the archangels, I associate them with Samael for Saturn, Samael being more feminine. I associate Saturn with mother, and Jupiter being more masculine, I associate with Zadkiel. The Zad bit means righteousness, Zadki means righteousness, and that was actually the Hebrew name for the planet Jupiter. So those two, cosmic yes and cosmic no, have got to have some kind of agreement about how things are going to get organised. And the Saturn, Samael energy is has a tendency to be restrictive and cautious and hold back. And the Jupiter Zadkiel energy has the tendency to want to expand and get bigger. Now, if you take the sign of Aquarius, it's very associated with things like technology. And we might consider that it's associated with the internet and perhaps with artificial intelligence. It's certainly a mental sign, it's an air sign. And it's also willing to go places which are a bit out of the box, out of the ordinary. So in the sign of Aquarius, those two characters could potentially bring great benefits when they collaborate on the level of the kind of technology that we're already starting to use, especially in the last year. You know, people who weren't very techie concerned previously suddenly discovered how to use Zoom for the family meetings and so forth, family birthday parties, we did that. So the capacity to do things technologically could really expand. Saturn, being the more cautious one, might say, yeah, but don't run away with this too far. And possibly that will mean that governments come in and start regulating it and putting limitations on technology and how it's used. So, and that could also bring in much more of an element of Big Brother watching you and keeping an eye on you using technology. So it has a double-edged sword. This is the technology that we're inventing. However, the sign of Aquarius has also got the, for me anyway, got the implication that we could start expanding using our consciousness, and that Saturn, Samael, is about finding systems whereby our consciousness will do the work for us and not our machines. Many, many, many years ago, when the fax machine was first invented, I remember saying to Will, and we had a fax machine, I remember saying to Will, we're only inventing the fax machine because we're not properly using our telepathic potential. And it reminded me of a story about Tibet where it was an anecdote of some kind. I can't remember where I came across it, but I'd heard this story about some younger generation Tibetan saying to some old monk, oh, I'm just going to go down to the next village because they've installed a telephone. So the monk wants to know, well, what's a telephone? And so the younger person explains about telephones. And he said, so you want to talk to somebody at a long distance? Yes, I do. And he said, but we've been doing that for generations. We talk to people at long distance. We don't need to walk down to the village to find a machine to use. And I think that's part of the new Aquarian emphasis. I don't know that it's necessarily the dawning of the age of Aquarius. That might be a topic for another video. But the Aquarian energy has got something magical about it, actually. It's got magic about it. And that's got the potential for us to use our consciousness in ways that are actually, we have used before when we lived different kinds of lives, but that we've lost touch with. We've got capacity for all kinds of things that we can do with the mind, which we don't use. So I think the Great Conjunction, that particular sign, is an invitation in a way to expand your consciousness, kind of find out what techniques there are for communicating with your loved ones without using the telephone, without using the mobile, without even using Zoom. How about that? Perhaps that is what's coming towards us. And some of the techniques which were kept secret by the mystics and only trained when they just trained initiates in order to get to understand these things. So, those secrets are coming out, perhaps. And the archangel for the sign of Aquarius I associate with the planet Uranus, I think is Raziel. And Raziel's name means keeper of God's secrets. So perhaps this sign is a sign that some of the secrets are beginning to unfold so that everyday people can grasp them, not just monks in Tibet. And if you keep meditating, those secrets are more likely to reveal themselves to you. Many blessings, and keep shining.